Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Manzoor Ali, and I'm going to be your host of the day. Welcome to the Edge Power Room, accelerating value delivery for banking and insurance with AI. I hope wherever you are from, I hope you and your loved ones are safe and well. Thanks for taking time and joining us from across the APAC region. The Edge Power Room is EdgeVerve's exclusive webinar series that brings together thought leaders and to discuss current challenges and consider technology solutions which will help improve business outcomes, such as workforce productivity, faster time to value, accelerating innovation, scale and growth in endless space across the enterprise. EdgeVerve, an Infosys company, is a global leader in AI and automation, assisting clients to thrive in their digital transformation journey. EdgeVerve's technology is deeply integrated into the hearts of over 400 technology companies across more than 140 countries, unlocking hidden business value from business processes, enterprise documents, and supply chain. Today, I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this. We have a power-packed agenda for you. But before we get into that, I have a couple of housekeeping items that I would like to announce about. At the bottom of your screens, we've lined up a couple of widgets which you can use to interact with us throughout the session. Use the Q&A button to post any of your questions for our speakers today. Someone from our team will get your questions to me and I will direct it to the panelists. We also have an interesting poll coming up. Request you all to take a moment to answer them to help us understand you better. So now moving on to our first session of the day, we have Badri Dewala. So Badri Dewala will be presenting the keynote for us today about unlocking business value with IDP solutions for banking and insurance. Badri is the Senior Director and Head AI and Automation Solutions at EdgeVerve. Badri is responsible for implementing solutions leveraging AI and RPA products for our enterprise clients. Badri has delivered cognitive automation across enterprise operations using AI techniques ranging from recommendation engines to deep learning. His current focus is on doc-to-digital approaches to pipeline enriched and validated extracts from documents to enterprise systems supporting business processes across new businesses, KYC, servicing claims, which I really look forward for Badri to speak about today. So over to you, Badri. Thanks for joining us.
Manzoor, thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon to our participants. I appreciate you taking the time and spending this hour plus with us. I'm going to take you through a very quick overview of the topic of the day, and we will get into details when we do the panel. Fundamentally, a couple of years ago, when we all stopped doing what we normally do due to COVID, digitization became immediate and necessary. And so as we started helping our clients, we noticed there were enough problems that we had to get through very, very quickly in both process and technology. And it's essentially in three dimensions. There are variations in the documents that you're trying to extract information from. There is a volume issue, sometimes too less volume, sometimes too much. And finally, the velocity, how quickly do you want the extraction? So as we went through all of this, we quickly realized that customer onboarding, new business, the interface where a banking or an insurance client is dealing with its customers, whether they're commercial or consumer, at that gap, there were a lot of inefficiencies that we could solve. But we also had to solve this end-to-end. So the initial immediate approach was to just use an OCR engine and see if you could get the information out. Now, OCR engines are getting much better. We use them to detect handwriting and to detect text. But if you want to provide an end-to-end experience where your client is submitting a folder of information, perhaps a nested zip file of images scanned and so on, and they contain scan noises, artifacts like tables and visuals, OCR alone doesn't cut it. So we were able to leverage very interesting computer vision and natural language processing models to take it through the entire pipeline, to understand what document we are looking at, extract the information from the document, validate it, and no system is designed to take all the information in a document. So you have to transform it in a form where you can straight through process it on a downstream system or provide it to a human, so they can complete the processing, especially things like compliance and things of that nature. One of the first things we realized was you could address all these problems at the interface of process technology and any human that may be involved. And so that's the good news. And as long as you're able to drive a lot of models using AI and deep learning approaches, you don't have to subject yourself to multiple templates and multiple rules-based and all these things that just don't scale. So you want to scale to thousands of document variants, millions of documents, and ideally provide real-time extraction, right? Where we saw the greatest benefit was in how you address the issues beyond what the technology capability can deliver. And what you're seeing here is the piece in the middle is really where all the technology capabilities come in. We have done some very interesting implementations where we string together the technology capabilities in a workflow, apply business rules, post extraction, where post the deep learning models have done their job and manage the ops. But where we saw the most bang for the buck was having a governance layer on top, where you have to have a meter on the value that the technology is delivering. And the meter that does that is governance stream, where you bring in a combination of client SMEs, our own SMEs and technologists, and we say that, is this the right problem to solve? Does this problem deliver the solution? And then you go about delivering it. So this is a very interesting learning that we had to fine tune. What you're seeing here is a KYC automation factory, which is where we kind of cut our teeth and learned quite a bit, because as you well know, any multinational bank has to deal with hundreds of variants due to the number of countries they operate, the languages, and you have different at different times of a KYC remediation, you need to have different things. So we were able to address the variant and volume dimensions of document extraction in KYC. And what you see at the rightmost end is we had to speed up loan underwriting when the pandemic hit, and it was all about velocity. How quickly could you tell the borrowers that you have all the documents that they're supposed to submit, and how quickly can you get back to them with a yes or no answer. And what you see in the middle is really when you start expanding the capability of a machine, a deep learning model, understanding what's in the document, when you start expanding that out into the natural language domain, where the information you want to extract is actually in paragraphs, and you have to distinguish between different contractual clauses and terms, and that's what you see in the middle. And this is a specific example of supplier contracts risk management, which is a boardroom item, not only in financial institutions, but even among others. And let us say that because of the regulatory changes, for example, GDPR, for example, force majeure clauses, you want to very quickly know what is in your contract, when do you need to update it, and if you have finished establishing a contract and throw it over the wall to a vendor manager, the vendor management office should be able to manage a vendor knowing all the clauses that particular vendor has signed off to, right? So we've had some pretty good success in delivering such document processing solutions, addressing the variance, volume, and velocity of documents. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about different dimensions of that, of the solution and the value it delivers in the panel. Back to you, Manzoor.
Thank you, Badri. That was a very insightful presentation, and I'm really interested to know, maybe as part of the panel, some of the examples that you spoke about, especially the contract elements, which we all come across in our work lives. With that, I mean, leveraging AI technology is delivering a lot of assured outcomes for faster loan processing, digital KYC, and processing claims for banks and insurance companies. And I can clearly see the benefits from what you just walked us through, Badri. So thank you for that. Before we move on to the next session, we would like to request you all to please take a moment and take the poll that will appear on your screens right now. Can we please have question 1 on the screen, please? Document digitization in your enterprise. Which line of business is leading the adoption? Sourcing and procurement, core banking, insurance operations, legal, and others. Yeah, the answers are coming thick and fast. Some interesting answers there. There seems to be a race between two categories. We've got 2 seconds, 1 second, and that's it. So we'll looks like there's a tie between finance and accounting and core banking, insurance operations. We'll talk more about it later. Can we go to the second poll, please? Can we move to the second poll, please? Yeah. Which OCR is used extensively across your enterprise? Kofax, Abby, FineReader, cloud-based OCR, and others. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Now, moving on to the next session, we've put together an interesting panel consisting of industry leaders. I'm really excited to talk. We've got an industry leader who's dealing with some of these problems. We've got a practitioner and we've got a consultant. So that gives us a wide-ranging view. So they're going to discuss document AI in action and give us insights into how businesses and the practitioners are dealing with the complexity of processing documents. Let's dive right in and hear from our experts. So joining Badri, we will have Mr. Vikram Gosar, Senior Vice President, Motilal Oswal Financial Services Private Limited. Vikram brings with him over 20 years of rich experience spanning across the BFSI domain. He's from IIM Indore. He has meticulously developed his experience in the broking industry. Vikram is currently the Senior Vice President product with Motilal Oswal, and his stints across various functions have helped him ingrain the nuances of an outside-in approach. Prior to running Motilal Oswal, Vikram's been part of the core team in brokerage services like India Bulls, Dani, and Angel Broking. Alongside him, we have Mr. Jeffrey Leong. He's at Infosys Consulting. Jeffrey is an experienced consulting and delivery executive, having worked across multiple industries and geographies. He's currently the head of the public sector consulting practice within Infosys and Infosys Consulting across Australia and New Zealand. Since joining Infosys Consulting in 2016, Jeffrey has been involved in all the major programs that Infosys has solutioned and successfully awarded across the financial services and public sector. Often he's led program teams that are large across often 350 plus member teams that span multiple locations. From a technical perspective, Jeff is inquisitive and needs to know how things work and we'll have a chance to pick his brains today. So let's dive right into the panel. From a context, I thought, given the range of leaders that we got in the panel today, I'll first hear from Vikram, who comes from a business perspective. So maybe I'll start with you, Vikram. Can you tell us, from your experience, the challenges and complexity when data is trapped in documents as part of your business process, and how are you dealing with it today?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Mansoor, for the introduction. I am honored to be part of this panel discussion. See, data is the most important thing for any business, and collecting the same in a correct format and with minimum effort is the key to success for any business. Motilal Oswal is a financial service provider, which is a highly regulated business. Now we are governed by regulators and we have to complete the customer's KYC before they can actually trade with us. Since this is first step of the customer with Motilal Oswal, we want to make it very convenient and fast for the user. Instead of asking customers to fill up, all the information and then upload the document, we simply ask the customers to upload the acceptable document. As soon as the document is uploaded in our KYC app or web, the information is extracted and auto-filled. The challenges are that the information can be from multiple document types, and thus the format may vary. So the information which is extracted has to be very accurate and fast. Intelligent document processing helps us to achieve this, and we process the customer's KYC in time very effectively.
Thanks, Vikram. That is an interesting use case that you have often come across situations where we've submitted documents in a web, but there are instances where they get immediately verified, and there are instances that could take weeks. So I'm closely aware of what you're talking about. So maybe the next question is to the practitioner, Jeff. In your experience of working with large enterprises, in your experience, you've dealt with a lot of digital transformation initiatives. Can you tell us about what are the key objectives, drivers for these digital transformation initiatives, and how does AI play a role in that?
Sure, thank you. Let me try to think about this from two angles, because as Mansoor said, I've worked a lot in financial services, but I've also worked across a couple of many other industries as well. If you think from a commercial perspective, like banks, they're interested in top line and bottom line, right? So increasing revenues or improving efficiency and cost control. So, and when you see digital initiatives will ultimately align to one or both of these key objectives. And we often use AI and document digitization, in fact, and a lot of the technologies that Badri talked about to really drive efficiency in the processing chain. And if you think about mortgages, we've gone from months and weeks down to days. And we think of loan approvals, we've gone from weeks to hours. And that's a lot to do with the intelligence we can apply now. If I then flick it and look at non-commercial and government, so say registration, licensing and other government services, they're not as interested in top line, bottom line. Funding and budgets are still important, but it's all about customer engagement and satisfaction. So if you think about government services now, we're all customers of government services, that sort of intelligent automation can speed up your document processing, all the applications you might do. If you think about Australia, for example, we're quite a big welfare-based country where we have a lot of payments that go out to people who need it. And we're able to spin that around really fast, to support employment due to lack of employment due to COVID, due to floods that we're having now. And that's all about intelligent processing of applications, extracting information really quickly and being able to process applications. So different ways of using the technology, but it's all about top line, bottom line, or it's about customer engagement.
Thanks, Jeff. Those are some really interesting thoughts there, and some good examples of what we are going through in Australia and other parts of the world. So thanks for that. I'll come back on that question, but maybe moving on to Badri for now. Badri, you've worked with multiple organizations in your role as a consultant. What are the typical problems that that clients face across your experience when it comes to data that's trapped in documents?
Yeah, I mean, I think you heard a flavor of that from Vikram and Jeff. The fundamental problem I hear is we hear from operations people who are trying to do one of two things: either accelerate getting to revenues or be very efficient in that process. So the first piece we always deal with is there is a gulf between information that's in the document and the process that needs it. So that's kind of where we stand. Either there is manual data entry, or something changed and information is now coming in documents, and they have to bring that in to the organization. So given that gulf, we then take to the next level, and that's what I was alluding to in my earlier presentation, is we then look at what are the variants that Vikram was talking about that they have to deal with. What are the volumes that you need to deal with, and how fast do you need to get things? And to be very honest with you, there are very few instances initially 2 years ago where we found a perfect alignment of all three, right? You would have the right capability, but you would not have enough of a volume to deal with, or it was not, it was needed very, very quickly, and you couldn't do certain things. But I think the last 2 years, where the drive to digitization has touched pretty much every part of the organization, we are back to solving that gulf.
Thanks, Badri. Thanks, Badri. Interesting thoughts. Yeah, that actually leads me to the next question. Maybe I'll give it to Jeff. I mean, most of these documents that you spoke about mortgage processing, you spoke about KYC documents, and most of these documents end up with operations, right? I mean, the operations team are doing the bulk work of extracting those information from those documents manually, and Vikram spoke about some of how they've moved, and Badri just spoke about how the timelines have shrunk. Now, how at what point do the operations teams get involved, and when do you approach them as part of any implementation of such technologies? Can you throw some light on it, please?
Yeah, so very quickly, when it's actually the operations team that kind of comes and finds us, right? I mean, because they are the ones that suddenly dealing with a net new additions to what they have to deal with. So, I mean, I'll give you a very interesting example. We were talking to a CPG company, because it's so specific. They did not have the product information of what they were supplying to in some of their secondary markets. And so we had to look at the product label from the images, and we had to reverse engineer. So this is not, an IT team or somebody that is trying to come up with this problem, right? I mean, they're trying to bring in this. I have another example in the financial space, where since everybody is adopting digitization, one prime loan provider for mortgage loans, they realized that their 2-hour lead on the rest of the market was shrinking. And so they came up with a mechanism where if we could automate the verification of identity, employment, and assets, it would give them a 30-minute head start. So they were, their timelines were shrinking against competition, and they found out a specific efficiency that would add 30 minutes to the way they could do things. So it is coming from the two dimensions that Jeff talked about, top and bottom line, and then there's a third piece, and that's all about compliance, right? I mean, GDPR, for example, force majeure, for example, these things came in the last couple of years where everybody wanted to know, in their contracts or otherwise, what is on there. So the process guys kind of realized that, they need an automation or an automatic fix, and that's kind of how we get involved.
Thanks, Badri. Jeff, would you want to add some of those scenarios where business gets involved and timing of it? Because, from a practitioner's view, you would see different clients approaching the same problem in different ways. So would you mind throwing some light on it, please?
Yeah, I think we'll land on things like obviously more efficient document handling. But one of the things we've found is the ability for the operations area to flex up and flex down. If you're in a business where it could be seasonal or there could be unexpected circumstances, disasters that need a lot of processing, then using these automated technologies becomes really, really important because it allows the responsiveness of your organization back to them. An example I'm working through at the moment is actually a large high volume employment intake. And I'm talking thousands per annum, up to 8,000 people per annum. So you could imagine that the amount of, to get 8,000 successful applicants, you actually need potentially double that to process. And if you think about what a case manager needs to do, they need to collect the application information, need to extract the right important aspects. And Badri showed a slide where it pinpointed in a document key fields. And then you've got to package up credentials, passports, education transcripts, medical records, all that sort of stuff needs. And if you could automate that and intelligently interpret that, keep it together for a case manager, you can suddenly see how quickly you can flex a workforce up and down without adding huge amounts of people up and down, but also frees people up to, the big gold nugget is to free people up to do high value tasks. And this is where this technology is absolutely perfect. And, I've given you an example of an employment situation, but that's the whole KYC scenario again, right? It's about collecting important aspects of an individual so that you can process them quickly. So yeah, really good, but really helps the people side, this technology.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Interesting thoughts there on flexing up and down without having to add a lot of workforce in the mix, which is definitely a big challenge in these times. So question to Vikram, maybe. In your banking and the insurance industry in general, do you see, where are the areas that you see big potential for applying these technologies apart from what you're already doing? You spoke about some of the application process. Is that the best area, or do you think of other areas where these technologies could be applied, Vikram?
So wherever we deal with physical document, and we have to extract the data, those all use cases can be covered. What comes to my mind right now, apart from KYC, is any of the customer statements or any of the customer's requests. If we can read those, handwritten requests, for example, and convert them into a text, or read out what the account numbers and the client's initial things like mobile number or email ID, that could be something which could help us, quickly cater to the clients. Maybe he uploads a scan document, and we could extract information and give him back the data what he requires. That could be a use case for mutual funds or insurance, for example. So these are the couple of use cases that comes to my mind at the moment.
Sure. Thanks, Vikram. Yeah, I think we've gone through the mortgage process, and we know how long it takes, and the number of documents that we have to submit, even the validation of some of those documents to say whether they are, if you submitted your pay slips, are they the last months, or if you've submitted something old. So definitely, based on what you've just said, I can see a lot of use cases that come up that could be used. On the topic of use cases, what is your recommendation, Vikram, for a quick win for organization? You mentioned application, some of those documents, but do you, amidst all of those use cases, do you think there are some quick wins, to do a pilot or something like that?
Sorry, Manju, I just lost your voice for last 1 minute. If you come on, sorry, once again.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me now. So,
yeah.
Referring to you spoke about a few use cases. When an organization attempts an implementation of technology like Extract Edge, do you think, or would you suggest a quick win approach, and what, according to you, could potentially be a quick win out of use cases that you spoke about?
See, for any organization, fast implementation and low implementation cost is the most important thing to begin with. Then the data has to be very accurate. So if these requirements are fulfilled, any organization would attempt to implement a new technology for this. Sometimes if any new document is allowed by a regulator, and how fast we can adopt those changes, how fast this can be read, auto read, that could be something which could also be helpful, because otherwise we'll have to wait for a technology to adopt that new requirement document and then work on extracting that. So if all those things are auto built up through AI or something, so that could help any organization start using any new changes which comes in at the earliest. So these are the few important points that the organization should look across for implementing solutions.
Sure. Thanks, Vikram. Interesting thoughts there, and I think the accuracy is also. I think based on what you're saying, I'm also picking up that the ability to implement fast and potentially even have your business get trained on adding new documents, adding new formats in the system. How does the system learn from itself? Is more rather than waiting for a technology company to come up to speed with the business problem. It sounded like what you're saying is that if the system could learn itself with business intervention, that would be a better way to go. Is that would you agree with that?
Yeah. So Mansoor, I don't know if you were going to go there, but I thought it is since Vikram brought it up, I want to share some of the things that we are hearing a lot, right? I mean, the fast and low, right? The fast implementation with low involvement with anybody outside is the number one ask. And that is the good news with document digitization as opposed to, implementing an auto management system or implementing a loan processing system, because the information is in the document, and these documents, literally are sitting in a folder somewhere. They are not locked up in any process. And the bank or the insurance company or any enterprise has a system that is expecting the fields, if you will, right? So if you put these two together, you must be able to do digitization in a way a business user can ingest any document type. There should not be a technology implementation. And that is where I think you have to go way beyond OCR and format specific captures into letting a deep learning model figure out what it is looking at, how to extract, and not have the business user deal with the technology. So it's a very important point. When you deploy document digitization, this is not an IT project. You cannot have an IT support stream that is watching over every document that's trying to come in and they do something in the background. This has to be very low code, no design experience necessary, and the business user should be able to do it. And I'm glad, Vikram, that you brought that point up, and that's really where we are seeing a lot of demand.
Thanks, Badri, and it's very interesting because is such. Maybe I'll just follow up that question to yourself, Badri. Is that do such technologies really exist? It's like the fast and slow and learning on their own. And what is your experience in coming across in your many years of experience? I know you spoke about how OCR, we've depended on OCR a few years ago, and now intelligent document processing has taken over. But really, the ability to do fast and low and learn on their own, without IT support, do such technologies exist today?
Right. So what we call is really a focus on consumption of information. So if you are able to design a solution that understands how the information that is being extracted is consumed, if you do that, then the business user does not care about the how. And we have deployed models where we can keep track. There's a lot of telemetry that comes when you have a model as opposed to when you have a human doing manual entry, right? I can provide traceability on what field came from what page or what document and what was the accuracy of the model that predicted that field, right? So you put the models outside, and there is this whole conversation around managing models, and then when do you know you need to train the man versus the machine? All of that happens in the background. But in the foreground, the business understands that they have a digitization solution that spans certain lines of business. They don't care about what document is tied to what line of business. They should be able to just come in. I mean, it should be as simple as using a copier. They should put any document they want, and as a difference, instead of getting a copy, you're getting a digital version of it. And we have enabled that. I mean, we have clients that figured out how to do GDPR models when our initial solution did not include a GDPR model. So they were able to train the machine for GDPR. We have, especially in mortgage processing, there's so many regulations, federal level, state level, and so on. The process itself does not take all that information. The forms have a lot more information to satisfy regulatory requirements, and the business user is able to, filter and use the pieces that are necessary for the business process. So it's very much a done thing. It's as important as table stakes when you take document digitization to the market.
Very, very interesting, Badri. Thanks for that. Looks like we can keep talking on that particular topic for a long time, but I'll just move on to Jeff. Jeff, in your extensive experience in digital transformation programs, do you see such programs where you have to overhaul all of their processes and technology systems processes, or would you suggest, or do you think where you pilot some approaches that work better? What are your thoughts, especially implementing such technologies?
It's an interesting question. We all live in a world today, I think, where we still do waterfall, we still think we do agile, and we actually do a bit of both. Sometimes we try to apply waterfall principles on agile projects, which is another challenge. I
call it fragile.
Yeah. So that's reality. But I'm going to give you a very sit on the fence answer to your question around, do you start with a pilot or do you just do a complete overhaul? And the question is, it often depends, right? And from my type of business, it's about understanding the organization and the culture and how much disruption makes sense. Okay, and then you plan accordingly, and sometimes it could be either. But if I land on somewhere, the general expectation, because today we're all iPhone users or Android users, we all use apps. So the expectation is that we're going to build something, but it's going to keep changing. And Badri just created a great example of, we implemented a solution which wasn't GDPR ready, but guess what? The foundations were there and it became GDPR ready. So they're the types of thinking you need to do ahead. So in the work we do, we'll think about the upfront strategy, we'll identify business benefits, all the standard stuff you're meant to do, but then you do the backlog and you prioritize against business value or whatever the lever is. That makes sense. And by talking about that sort of app nature that we're all used to, then is you start to think about the MVP approach, and you start to think about, you call it a pilot if you like, but it's about then incrementally building on that foundation and then creating additional business value as your business need changes. So pilots are very useful, but I always say it really depends on the organization and the disruption capacity in there. The pilot approach also allows you to, again, incrementally deliver value and functionality, but it also allows you to what I call bring people along with you so they can change in increments rather than doing a massive change, right? You want people to adopt and you want to embed change, and that sort of approach helps. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks, Jeff. It does. And I love the focus on the people, right? I mean, because it's eventually people are the users of all of these systems, and the change that we're talking about is important. The chunks of change they can adopt. We are in times that, as you mentioned, COVID's accelerated all of these changes, but it is still very people dependent, and some of those changes, the approaches, I agree. What you said made sense. It depends on the circumstances.
Yeah.
I just wanted to probably have one last question with yourself is, Badri spoke about low code, and in these digital transformation initiatives, the low code and the fast. What's your view there? Because again, I know it's people dependent, and how does
it's a good question. And it's not just the technologies that Badri's talking about. My experience in the last sort of 24 months has all been in technologies which is effectively low or no code, right? That all the platforms we're dealing with are heading down that pathway because people want to configure and not develop, right? And that creates a different mindset about how to approach a problem, but also different skill sets are now needed. And as Badri said, it's much more business oriented now and people process oriented. And I'm seeing that in an enormous amount of platforms that we're now using to implement solutions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff. Very interesting thoughts. And yes, I guess you have a lot more experience than I do. So, but then I've come across, in my experience, the lot of the low code, no code initiatives that we are coming across to see. I'm glad to see that that's the case in a lot of industries as well.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of the panel session. Still, we've got one more session to go. But before we move on, I request everyone to take a moment and answer the poll that will pop up on your screen. Please keep sending in your questions. The questions are coming in thick and fast, but there's a poll question that's coming up on your screen now. Which of the below factors are key to adopting intelligent document processing in your enterprise? Top line growth, cost savings, improved workforce productivity, organizational automation initiatives, and enhanced customer experience. Maybe we'll have 10 more seconds for the poll. Thank you. Thanks for participating in the poll. Now, we now move into the last segment of today, the Q&A session from us. You feel free to send in your questions. We've got a few questions coming in, and I'll have Badri, Jeff, and Vikram answer the questions. The questions that has come through, maybe based on the question, Badri, probably it's to you. The question is, for automated document processing as extraction of information from fixed templates, does the panel or practitioners like yourself encounter use cases such as text summarization, text comparison in case of legal documents, you're leveraging natural language processing, natural language understanding, and so on and so on? Badri, it's to you, but Jeff or Vikram, if you want to add, feel free to add, but I will start with Badri.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Manzoor. Actually, year 2021 was year of computer vision. There was a lot of requests from our clients, asking us to understand certain labels, understand certain, floor plans, and assets we were underwriting and all of that. And then 2022 came along, and then all of a sudden everybody wants where the solution component happens to be, not just natural language processing, but transformer deep learning model based natural language processing. I don't want to go too much into technology, but that's where we are. So I'll give you some examples. So risk, right? I mean, any regulatory, any industry that's regulated, like banks and so on, they have to have a risk management strategy. And that risk is actually comparison of, let us say, you're doing supplier risk. It is about the contracts that the clauses and terms you have with a supplier against the tightening of the clauses that your legal, your finance, your ESG guys may want, right? So you would have to do class comparison. So that's one example. In the same example, we are now asking the supplier management, the vendor management is now going to a point where there's a lot of news that comes, fortunately or unfortunately, natural disasters, man-made. They need a very quick summary of what is coming, and they got to tie that to a particular vendor, and then they have to tie it back to what they are buying from the vendor. So it's very interesting that this gentleman brought up that question. But absolutely, I mean, natural language processing is where we are headed. You can only do so much extracting, fields from documents. I give you another example. We are talking to investment banking and underwriting of instruments, muni bonds, money market instruments. So you need to start picking up things like interest accrual rates. When does it, is it based on LIBOR or not? This is all spelled out in very fancy financial language. And I think Vikram will know more about this, but I'll kind of stop there.
Thanks, Badri. I think I was going to ask Jeff and Vikram to add, but I think there's a question that has two parts, which I can be done by Jeff, and there's an interesting question that I want to ask Vikram to Jeff. But to make these processes and operations faster, we need some level of straight-through processing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want just 30% of the process to be automated and let's still, remain done manually. So how do you deal with that, Jeff, in programs like these?
Interestingly enough, we've actually got the opposite problem, and I'll explain it. So straight-through processing is really key for velocity. So we will work with our clients on a couple of levels. We look at the low risk aspects, and they're the ones that are candidates for straight-through processing. One of our clients is still in that transition of complete automation to the human intervention. So in those situations, we present the information through our digitization processes for human decisioning. Okay, we call that assisted decision making as opposed to intelligent decision making, right? So you deal with both, and I think you got to work on the risk factors based on your organization's business, and you can start to map out what is a true candidate for straight through processing and where your client feels better for some human assisted decision making and interpretation. Sure. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. That makes sense. The second, as I said, Vikram, it's interesting because it's always a question in the business leader's mind: how can we trust AI over human operations, right? So, Vikram, do you have some thoughts on that?
So that question will always remain. The compliance team and the business will always say, how do we trust a machine compared to a human? So the approach that one could take here is, you start with a small piece, and the moment you start seeing the good number of use cases where you see a good success ratio, you keep on increasing the STP and keep reducing the human intervention. And on top of it, you can build up a process where wherever there is a deviation, only that part of piece can go to a verifier or a human verifier, we would say. And once it is verified through a simple verification, that point of screen or the point of document can be popped up, and he verifies it. Either he accepts it or he rejects it. The STP process could not be 100%, but I would say that it would still be a 90-95% STP process, and the remaining 5%, even if human is involved, there's no lag time. It is very fast, and the customer doesn't have to wait. So if this approach is taken, this could be a solution. And over a period of time, organization, once they see that AI and the automation is working, STP is working, then the confidence is built up. So then the compliance team, business team will have that confidence. Yes, whatever is done is useful or is working out, and there is no deviation from what we need to store the information or we need to verify.
Yeah. And Vikram used two important words to me in there, and that's about confidence and trust, right? So as that builds up and that happens, then you can actually move the dial to much more straight through, right? So yeah, good points.
True. And I guess, I like that, Jeff, and thanks, Vikram, because it's important to build some credentials, and I think picking up the right use cases to start with, build the credential and then move on, which was actually the next question. Interesting. Should organizations consider IDP initiatives at enterprise level, or should they go use case and taste success or failures. I guess the part of the question was just answered by Vikram in his answer, and Jeff, you've summarized that well. So it's important to build those credentials and keep being successful. The organization believes in it and supports that across the organization. Yeah. So Jeff, I think we spoke about during the panel. Spoke about the low touch and high velocity engagements. I think there's a question on, can you please elaborate on how does these low touch and high velocity engagements work in real-time business operations? How does that work for? Just ask for an elaboration of that thought.
Where the reason I brought that up is we're working through a scenarios with one of our clients at the moment where they are used to almost individually handling every single customer or candidate that comes through. What we are doing is transforming their organization to take the low risk categories and make them straight through processing. So in a way, we're almost doing the opposite with them. We're actually shifting them to automation as opposed to trying to slow them down. The part of the thing that their culture change that needs to happen, and that's what we're working through, is I haven't got, as Vikram said, that trust and confidence in the intelligence yet. Right, so that's the process we've got to start working through with them, and that will be the time thing that Vikram talks about. Right, it'll be about establishing the credentials, the trust, and then people will then start. I talked about creating capacity, right? So once we move more people to straight through processing, because it's low risk decisioning based on the information we extract from documents, then the case managers can then work with the individuals where there are exceptions, right? And that's where the real value lies, is unlocking that capacity.
Sure.
Yeah, let me quickly add to that, Mansoor, because I think it's a very important question. We've been working with our clients the last 4 or 5 years on this, and where we are seeing this concept of how do you build this is, so my client now comes to me and says, I want to deliver a verify identity capability. It doesn't matter which line of business is going to use it, right? And so we deliver a verify identity capability or a verify employment capability, and that is used. It's a one-time digitization, right? I take this information, it's available across the enterprise, and I have one client that actually runs essentially a message bus with JSON of all this information. So you could be anybody in the organization that was not even thinking about it, but suddenly if you want this digitization, it's available to you. And it's very important. You digitize one and you use many. And by building these as such capabilities, not extraction of passport, you say verification of identity. And that is a capability that can be used across the organization.
Thanks, Madhuri. That's a very powerful way of saying it. Extraction of passport to an identity verification. Thanks. I think that's something that'll stick to me in this session. I think there's a lot of questions coming through. I don't know if we have enough time for all of them, but maybe the next question deals with infrastructure. Badri, maybe I will ask you about it. How do you deal with scale? Let's say you're from processing 5,000 documents to 5 million documents. Should the bank or should the organization be worried about infra costs going up?
Yeah, I don't want to be flippant about this, right? So, when we can process 15,000 documents to 15,000 pages in an hour with 24 core machine. But I think the bigger question here is training. And if you're going to use vision-based models, you're talking about GPU-based training, and GPU's cost, because suddenly everybody wants to use a GPU. But once you have completed your training and you're deployed in production, what we have been able to do is, as the volume ramps up, so we are sitting right next to where the documents are coming, we can spin up or we can spawn more VMs to do the extraction. So we have not found a massive infra problem on the deployment of model side, but if you rely heavily on GPUs for model training, you are going to bear some other costs.
Yeah,
sure.
So Badri talked about from the infrastructure point of view, and that was the question. But my earlier question posed what, the value of what these do from a people perspective is you can spin up and spin down capacity, right? And obviously that translates to infrastructure support. But again, it's about the efficiency you can provide to an organization by spinning up and spinning down capacity, which is one of the core outcomes of this type of solution.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. That's an interesting thought. Thanks for sharing that. Just a follow-up on that, Badri. I think a lot of organizations think about, worried about data not leaving the environment, right? And especially these machine learning environments, you're talking about training, you're talking about ingesting data because these GPUs are required. I'd have to put them in the cloud. So can these solutions be integrated into existing infrastructure so that the data never leaves the environment?
Yeah, I mean, for all the talk about going to the cloud, regulated industries, they have their documents in their production environments on premises, and any document digitization has to sit next to where the documents are. You cannot just ship these terabytes of documents across the globe. So where the clients can use the cloud, where I gave you the example of an interface between a client and the bank or the client and the insurance company, that is an interesting point of entry that you can deliver the solutions in the cloud, or you must be ready. So now, we have optimized our implementation down to delivering containers, and we even deliver containers specific to the hardware our client uses. Just to minimize the GPU costs, we are able to do some optimizations with certain CPU providers. So you must be ready to deliver digitization solution both on-prem and on the cloud. There's nothing in the technology itself that stops it. And we are talking documents here. I want to have two quick things before we close, right? So the one thing is getting information data for digitization is actually a lot easier than doing a ML project where you literally have to source multiple data from different data sources. Here you have a content management system or a folder somewhere that has the documents. That's step number one. It's actually relatively a lot easier to do a digitization engagement. Step number two, and this is what I learned the hard way, and one of our panelists actually alluded to it, is don't try to make it appear like your model is trying to tell the human something to do. That doesn't go well. A lot of things come up. Instead, think of the assisted way, where you present a bionic power to the human, when the human is involved, right? And the bionic power being going through a 500-page document and picking up 20 fields with extremely high level of contextual accuracy and the field accuracy, right? So it is data, it is document, it's easily available in enterprises, and then empower the individual that has to deal with the information from this data. Thanks,
Badri. I think questions are coming thick and fast, and I'm very glad that we had a very enriching conversation. I certainly learned a lot, but unfortunately, that's all time we have for. With that, we come to the end of our session today. I want to thank the panelists, Jeff, Badri, Vikram, for your time today. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope you all had a wonderful time at the event. I personally learned quite a bit, and I thank you all for taking the time to be with us today. I hope it's been a valuable experience, and you're leaving today with something that you can take away for your digital transformation or critical business operation improvement initiatives. We look forward to connecting with you. Take care, stay safe, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.
It was a pleasure connecting.
Bye.